All right, hello everyone. I am Brian Germain, and this is Casual Chat. And I've got a friend of mine who's a skydiver and an adventure enthusiast and done a lot of really interesting things. B Mora, who has recently gone scuba diving under the ice, and I've been wanting to ask some questions about this experience. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something. It was definitely more terrifying than skydiving for me.
I don't doubt it at all. I don't doubt it at all. So, well, first, what possessed you? What made you think I want to put on scuba tanks, cut a hole in the ice, and go underwater?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I kind of it was kind of a journey there. So I've been scuba diving for quite some not quite some time. I started back in 2010 and then, did one or two dives. But I started getting serious again about it last year. And it was kind of a thing that came back into my life out of tragedy, if you could say that. So in July of last year, my 7-year-old nephew drowned in Lake Michigan, and his uncle also drowned trying to save him. And so it was this really big tragedy for our family, but it also got me thinking about just water safety, about scuba diving, about public safety diving, and the divers who went to recover his uncle. Um, and so I started kind of a path back to doing that, and got certified as a public safety diver. And then while talking to people, I not only do I have a love of like adventure and diving, and I love cold weather. I'm a cold weather person. And so somebody mentioned that there was a big ice diving festival in Minnesota. And I was like, oh, sure, that sounds like a great time in theory. Uh, and I went there, but to kind of check it out, and then to go hand in hand with the public safety diving. Somebody I was talking to was saying how the public safety diving world is very, very small, and within that world, an even smaller portion of people want to do rescues that are under ice. And so those are very hard to get people to do. And I was like, oh, well, it's just a little cold. Um, so why not try it? And so actually, yeah, the first kind of week at the Ice Fest was great, but it was kind of a bust because the cutoff for diving with Patty, with the diving organization that most people use, is once it hits 0 degrees, you cannot dive, and we were at 1 degree. So there was a lot of gear malfunctioning, freezing. I didn't get to do it, and so I came back 3 weeks later.
Wow.
And I flew back out to Minnesota 3 weeks later, where it was like, a balmy like 10 degrees. And a group of us went out and yeah, took a chainsaw and cut a hole in the ice with 2 instructors and got it done.
Wow.
But it was yeah, it was one of I'm a very let's just do this and think about it later kind of person.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was probably one instance where I was like, I really should have thought about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But you know,
if you think about things too much, then you end up living on your couch, right? I mean,
yeah,
at
I
some
think
point,
it's the
you have to
fear,
decide.
of everything and anything that could go wrong, and everything about it that's a bad idea. And so I tend to try to not live in that space. And so I was like, no, other people have done this. This is fine. Um, so it was, yeah, we got it done, but it was probably yeah, the most extreme thing I feel I've done in quite some time, if not ever.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm imagining myself, putting on gear. Obviously, this is dry suit, right? Not
Yes.
wetsuit. This
Yeah, there
is
were actually two people in a wetsuit, which was insane to me. But yes, I did a
oh,
dry suit.
oof, I would, yeah, I would want to do that. And then so you put on all this gear, which probably takes like a while.
Yes.
of just, making sure that you do it the right way. And I know from skydiving that if I rush when I put stuff on, it makes me more nervous.
Yes.
Did you find that
Yeah.
was the same kind of thing where you move really like extra slow and methodically, like almost like you're performing a mass?
I did because there were lessons learned the first week when we couldn't get it done. I was moving a little quickly,
Mhm.
and I didn't know it at the time, but because we still do surface support if we're not in the water,
Mhm.
um, that the socks I had on, I had three pairs of socks on, and before I put my dry suit on, they had gotten wet. Um, so even though the dry suit keeps everything dry, you're still feeling the temperature of everything.
Sure.
Yeah, and I ended up getting it wasn't bad, but a little like a good amount of frostbite on my feet because my socks were now wet inside of my dry suit and I was standing on ice for hours. Um,
Sure.
and had I
Wool socks, I'm hoping.
yeah, one pair of them were, the other two
Oh,
not so much.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it was a lot slower of making sure nothing was wet, making sure everything was sealed, making sure all the hoses were hooked up and gloves and yeah, definitely making sure that everything was okay because I think very much like skydiving, it's not very forgiving of a lot of mistakes. So I wanted to make sure that yeah, so it was slow and we all help each other because it's bulky and hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot slower probably than I normally would get geared up.
Yeah. Yeah. So the mind state. Okay. So
Yes.
obviously, you know what you're about to do, or at least roughly, not having done it before, you can't have a super clear picture of what this is going to be like, but you're about to do something very real.
Yeah.
So I'm in my mind now. I've got all this gear on. I'm heavy. It's cold out, and I know this is about to happen. So
Yeah.
put yourself in that mindset. What's going through your mind? What are you doing in terms of processes to prepare yourself?
Um, so it's really funny because if anybody's ever ridden a plane up with me to altitude, they know how incredibly anxiety ridden of a person I am. And I think we have you people have this belief that we're all just adrenaline junkies who just never experience fear.
Right.
And when I was sitting there, on the edge of this little dark triangle that I couldn't see down into.
Mhm.
It's very much to me the same as anything you do. You have prepared for it, and it's a different environment, but you have done you have done this act in some way, and I have my own gear for scuba diving like I do for skydiving, and I feel like I trust my gear. I trust my gear. I trust how I've maintained it. I trust the people who are around me instructing me, or I wouldn't be here. And I think there's also that notion of um, just, I remember I took a canopy course with you once, and one of the things that always stayed with me is when you were talking about when we open our parachute, it's kind of like sort of the height of adrenaline for some people because it's like, I made it. And
Mhm.
talking about like going into deep breaks and just like taking that breath
Mhm.
and just slowing down a minute, looking around still, but slowing down a minute. Um, and I've always done that since. And I think that is just applicable to everything, like finding that moment where it's like, I'm going to take a deep breath, I'm going to be okay. But also knowing that if I really need to call this, I can call it and just say, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. And same with skydiving, at least until you're out the door.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
can call
exactly.
it and
Yep.
say,
Yep.
I don't feel comfortable, I don't want to do it. And so knowing that there are options, but also knowing um that, kind of slow is steady,
Yeah.
and you can do this. But it's a constant mindfulness exercise with me, constant mantra, whatever I decide that to be for the day. And just knowing that I have the ability to do this. but to me, it's physiological. It's calming my heart rate, getting my breathing under control, because I do have that anxiety going on, and there's only so much I can do about that. But if I
Yeah.
get the physical calm down, the mental is going to follow.
Yes, I believe that's true. I believe that's the way it works. Is bottom up is the beginning,
Yeah,
but at the
absolutely.
same time, it's the top down processes that can spin the wheel faster, that can
Yes.
cause us to get into hypervigilance and lack of trust. Not maybe
Yes.
not in maybe it's not so much the gear, but in one's self.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, yeah, you start to question your training or think of every mistake you've ever made,
Mm-hmm.
and am I
Mm-hmm.
really cut out to do this? And but also, reminding myself that in the worst mistakes I've made, I'm here and I've dealt with them and gotten out of it and I've learned from them.
Yes,
So there's
that's
something to
important.
be said about that. So, making sure if my mind goes there and I think of all the mistakes, making sure that my mind continues the process to what happened after.
Mm-hmm.
And and not just stopping at the mistake, but saying, well, how did you handle it? And you're
Yeah,
here, and what did you learn from it? So it's not going to happen again.
that's
Um,
that's
because you
important.
know better.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Not
yeah,
being dead is
yeah.
a big deal.
It's a
You know, people call
bigger
that, sort of
deal.
base frame, but the fact that you've survived this long,
Yeah,
and if every one of us, if we look back on our lives, there's lots of situations that could very easily have killed us.
very
But,
much so. Very
but
much so.
we're the ones that survived, you know?
Yeah,
People that are in the
yeah,
ground, okay, maybe they did that for a long time and then something caught up with them. Maybe there was a karmic
yeah,
contract, an exit point, but you're alive. And I think
yeah,
that to allow self-esteem, worthiness, confidence in oneself from that knowledge, from those
absolutely.
specific data points where you didn't panic,
Right.
maybe you did for a moment, but then you unpanicked yourself and got your composure again. You've done it
Yeah,
before, you can do it again.
yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think that's what, a lot of, just what I've learned from everything, starting with skydiving is that you know, you do things in spite of fear,
Yep.
like we do have it. But you do what you love in spite of it. And I talk to people all the time because I don't like heights. And skydiving is just something I love and will always do. But had I not initially overcome that fear, which was kind of a fluke, I didn't ever plan on going skydiving. Um,
Hmm.
but it's like I would have never found the thing that I love to do. Um, and I would have never understood or started maybe on the journey to overcome fear in really extreme situations.
Hmm.
And so and it helps in all aspects of your life, that kind of mindfulness, not just when you're doing really extreme things. And, so because extreme, to us might be jumping or ice diving, to somebody else it might be public speaking, and so
For
it
most people.
really, yeah, for most people. So it really does apply to, I think to everything that people can think of that they're scared of. And so, I, even though I did my ice dives and I'm certified and I'm sure I'll do it again, I now know, like with everything, there is going to be fear. It is, you know, um, it is, it brings its own challenges only because it's what they call an overhead environment. So if something's wrong, I
Mhm.
can't just kind of pop up and fix it. I have ice above me. So if something's going wrong under the water, I really have to figure it out, rely on my buddy, and just not freak out
Yep.
and just take a minute and know that I have, like we have our backup parachute, we have our
Hmm.
reserve. Well, I have my reserve regulator, I have all these reserves, I have my friend. So yeah, it's really being calm when you're doing it, but being calm when something actually starts to happen, which sometimes is very different. You know, we practice every emergency ever, and then when it happens, you're just like, oh, well, that's out the window.
Hmm.
It's happening.
Yep.
So yeah, it's but it comes with doing it over and over and over, like anything.
Hmm.
And practicing and building that muscle memory, and then finding out what works for you,
Yep. Yeah.
you know.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, really, this is something that the human body wasn't exactly designed to do. Like
No, it
skydiving.
was I think the one thing that did challenge me a lot was when we talked about kind of slowing down your physiological response, it was it was fine. But then when you jump into ice, like who knew, right? Like your heart
Mhm.
rate immediately goes up. Like your body is now physically trying to protect you from this incredible shock that you just put it through,
Yep.
even in a dry suit.
Hmm.
And I still have like my face and I didn't have
Yep.
dry gloves necessarily. So your body is still like, whoa, what did you do? So even yeah, being able to calm that down kind of again,
Yep.
in the water while you're incredibly cold was something I've never necessarily experienced, unless you're jumping on a colder day in winter maybe, but
Right. Which, I
you
mean, a
know
lot of skydivers out there can sort of appreciate what that feels like when you jump out the door and it's a really cold day and you have this shock moment and you stiffen everything, and
it's
then you go in,
true.
right? And I remember I was walking in northern Sweden in the winter time and it was really cold. I got off of a bus and we were going to another bus. And I was walking like this. My shoulders were up, like my whole body was stiff. And the person I was with, a Swede, looked at me and said, "Does that help?" This I said, "I don't know. I mean, maybe not." And so I relaxed myself. And then
Yeah,
you get that, vasodilation.
yeah,
And I started to feel warmer. I started to feel better. And I realized that I was creating as much of the suffering as I was perceiving to be happening
absolutely.
to me.
Yeah, because it's to me, I always say it's like just completely the opposite of what we're taught to do and what our body does. It's always, it's like when you're teaching people how to skydive and you tell them just relax. And it's like, I
Really?
am jumping out of a plane. You know what I'm
Yeah,
not going
right.
to do? And it's like, but when you find that moment where your whole body relaxes, everything becomes easier. You move easier, you have a better time. You're not, because, when you stiffen up, you're probably going to spin. And it's like,
Yeah. Yep.
which is going to increase the fear. But if you just relax, it'll be good. And it's the same with, I'm cold, I don't want to relax, but no, if you relax,
Mhm.
you'll be okay. And I think what's really important for me to remember is that just who I am, I'm going to feel that anxiety every time, and it doesn't mean that I can't do something, or that I shouldn't be doing something, or that
Mhm.
it's a terrible idea. It's just recognizing your own thought process, and knowing like, hey, this is going to come up, but I'm going to be all right. you
Yeah.
know and I'm going to get through it, and it's going to be okay. But I think that yeah, a lot of people just let that fear like completely overtake them, and once you're in that space, it's hard to get out of that.
Yep.
It's really hard, because you have to try to kind of decide what is my kind of irrational fear and what is the part that's rational, and
Mhm.
separating those two, because there's always, to me, you should always have, with anything extreme, always have a healthy amount of fear. And I say that when you get complacent and it doesn't scare you anymore, you need to step back,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
because complacency is the problem, and just understanding what your healthy amount of fear is,
Absolutely.
and what is your brain just kind of going on its own way,
Yep.
trying to scare
Yes.
you out of it.
Right. Right. And it's interesting how the brain functions, right? When we get ourselves really, really afraid or really angry, to me, that's kind of
Yeah.
the same wing of the mansion of the mind.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex and sort of our brain structures that allow us to make these discernments as to
Yeah.
whether this is a rational fear or an irrational one, if this is based, what I'm feeling is based on a past causing a
Yeah.
trigger, right? A trigger in my brain that's causing the amygdala and the hypothalamus to just go nuts. The limbic
Yeah.
system says you're in danger because this looks to you in this moment like that other thing.
Yeah.
And then you're living in the past, not the present. And it's a little harder to put on the brakes on the adrenaline response. And so I think this is
Oh,
where, like
absolutely.
you said at the beginning, if I can soothe my body, then my brain
Yeah.
will follow. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it comes in. That's where the prefrontal cortical activity starts to escalate again. And we start to think and imagine a different possible future than what our fear was saying. But what if I fail? What if I panic? What if I
Yeah.
freeze? What if I freeze?
Yeah. What if I freeze? Or, especially when you're around people who are, have been doing things for a long time. I think there's sometimes and whether you're just beginning, like whether it was my initial certification or like whether you're in, kind of going along and skydiving and doing like formations or doing big waves or whatever. And it's always like that imposter syndrome, then that's a different
Mm-hmm.
fear, of like, I shouldn't be here.
Yep.
I'm like too inexperienced to be here. And so there's always these different levels, and it's just kind of learning to compare yourself to yourself and just say, I'm good enough to be here, or I wouldn't be here, and do what I need to do. Don't worry about, how fast I get into the formation, or if like I get under the ice and I don't want to swim anywhere, I just want to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. All of
Yep.
these things will come later, as long as I do the job I'm here to do, but also have fun doing it. Um, and fun is relative to a lot of people. I don't think, many people thought that being under the ice was a good time. And we had those students who went in, they jumped in the hole and were like, nope, I'm out. Like, this is freezing. And we pulled them out. It was fine. And it was no harm, no foul. You tried. But yeah,
Yep.
it's just not being scared, um, of making mistakes, of failing, of doing it, of, just taking all of those things and pushing them aside. And at the end of the day, like, knowing you can do it and there's people around you that are going to help you do it.
Yep. Yep. And there is no failure in my view. Let's say I'm not an either or kind of guy. My
Yeah.
philosophy is oneness. All my experiences are one. They're all moving towards learning. They're
Mhm.
all pushing up the high water mark of my courage.
Yeah.
And so okay, so maybe it goes oh and then back down again because I put my foot in the water and went no, but I put my foot in the water. You know,
Exactly.
that's more
Yeah.
than I did before.
It's true. Like and we were telling, like, you geared up and you got in the water, and that's more than most people. And so if this is the end of it for you and you never want to do it again, that's fine. And if you kind of calm
Mhm.
down and reflect and want to come back in a few weeks, do it.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just to me, it's really you know, it- you can call it mindfulness or breathing. It's all of these things, but it's really just, to me, learning how to be kind to yourself, learning how to really just be kind to yourself in your fear and everything that goes through your head.
Maitri, right? It's a Tibetan term, Maitri. It means gentle, loving kindness for self and others, right? Both.
Yeah.
And having Maitri for oneself is often the hardest part.
Yeah.
You could look at somebody who's having a bad day or whatever, and okay, if they attack you, maybe it's a little harder, but
Yeah.
compassion, if you really try to look into somebody else's eyes and go, wow, I feel for you, and we can do that. But there's definitely this block within the ego that
Yes.
says I'm not worthy, I don't deserve reinforcement until I achieve my goals.
It's
I
true.
don't
Yeah,
know.
we is sometimes, and it's hard both ways, especially like you said, if somebody's wronged us or done something to us. But we find radical compassion towards other people easier than for ourselves. And really, if we've, never walked in people's shoes, I know it's like cliche and people say it a lot, but it's just not hard, to have that compassion for other people and then to practice that for yourself. And when you do that, there's very little, I think, that you can not accomplish if you do that.
Yeah.
But it's a process.
Yeah, it's a process of forgiving what happened and not making it who you are as a
Yeah.
personality judgment, but it was
Yeah.
another data point. It was another experience on your way to expanding, to
Yeah.
being
Just
more in everything.
definitely just not not defining yourself or other people by their worst moments, by their worst mistakes. And if you believe in the ability for other people to grow in whatever way that means, then you also have that same ability. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I a year ago I would have never thought about getting into ice, for diving, especially. And there, is the fear that people have of water. And there's these, thoughts I have of my nephew when I'm in the water. But it's just how I deal with that. I feel closer to him in the water, and family members of mine will never get in the water again. So, it's how you kind of deal with that. But it's always there. It's just quieting that down.
Yep.
You
Oh,
know?
we can't soothe things that we don't confront.
Exactly. Exactly. And to me, if something bad happens, and I think this is what's like so great to me about your story, is that when something bad happens, if I do everything I can to become as knowledgeable about this activity as possible, I lessen the chances of it being like something happening and of it being so scary. Because
Mhm.
now I know everything there is to know about it, or I'm close,
Yeah. Yep.
And so, yeah, that's what I think if everybody, so many people have a fear of drowning, or,
Yeah.
being stuck under something, learn how to swim and learn how to dive and learn how to handle that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the fear goes down. So yeah, I think yeah,
Yeah.
it's a process for us all.
It is. So I'm underwater, I'm blowing
Mhm.
bubbles. I'm in an overhead environment that's really, really cold and provocative, right? And I find that the fear response is increased when I'm cold. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've observed that, but when I'm cold, the
Oh yeah.
behavior patterns of my body that it just naturally, instinctively does, causes me to observe the state of my body, and then my mind sort of projects expectation based on that feeling, and
Yes.
things can get worse for me mentally if I allow it. I don't know if you observe that as well when you're underwater.
Yes. I I did. It reminded me, I thought it's so funny. I think so much of skydiving when I'm scuba diving, only because of the parallels,
Mhm.
and how similar they are in so many ways. And I was incredibly cold. And so my regulator was breathing a little wet, and for those who don't know, it's just a little water intake, but it was negligible. It was nothing. But you're cold, and so your fear is like, oh my God, I can't breathe. And but I think of people who, it's like they hold their breath when they leave the door, right? And
Mhm.
then
Yep.
and then they're trying to catch their breath at terminal velocity. It's real hard.
Yeah.
And so it's like your mind is telling you, I can't breathe, but it's like, yes, you can. You
Hmm.
just need to slow down. And I definitely, for that second was like, I can't breathe, there's ice above me, what do I do? And really just slowing down and be like, and thinking and being like, well, you have your extra regulator, you have your friend right here. So just try for a minute, and it was perfectly fine, but just having to slow that thought process down, because that's the point where you spiral, or you
Hmm.
don't. And then really just being able to relax, like you said, you have your shoulders up and you're freezing. But
Hmm.
then really looking around and noticing that even though it's terrifying to be under the ice, it's incredibly beautiful to be under the ice.
Yes.
And, seeing like your bubbles and seeing like how clear everything is, it's like, wow, this is actually really beautiful. And really hanging on to that instead of the fear. It's like
Yeah.
there's it with, especially, with jumping as well, there's so few people who are getting to experience this,
Mhm.
or this underwater environment that's incredibly gorgeous, or who gets to like jump all over the world and see these great places from this point of view,
Mhm.
and really just taking in, how like the gratitude I have for that, like,
Yeah.
and how grateful I am to be able to do that. And it really just, it changes your perspective, but you have to change it in that instant. And
Yes.
that's what's hard.
Yes, exactly. After the fact, you can go, "Oh, that was really pretty," but I was scared out of my mind the whole time. But to wake up, right? To wake up in the moment
In the
and
moment,
shift
yeah.
out of fear into awe, like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God," and you get almost like goosebumps.
Yeah.
When we talk about, love being the opposite of fear, I think that we're allowing us or to allow ourselves to become more kind of steeped in the experience of loving a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing like there is a reason, good or bad, that I wanted to do this,
Yeah.
So let me bring my mind back to that, back to what it was that made me want to do this to begin with. And yeah,
Wow.
it is, I know that it is something that I will for sure do again. But I also know that, with these last two instances, I will just continue being more prepared. Like, oh, I wish I would have had this, or I wish I would have done this.
Hmm.
And yeah, you learn as you go to continue making it more enjoyable. But yeah, it's learning long term, short term, and in the moment how to change your mindset. And I
Hmm.
don't think any of us are perfect at that.
No,
Um,
no, of course
you
not.
know,
Of course not. But I do believe we get perfect moments, you know,
oh, absolutely.
right? Where
Absolutely.
there's all this, sort of drudgery where you're, getting yourself ready and all the gear stuff, whether it's skydiving or climbing a mountain or whatever.
Hmm.
And there's physical pain, right? And
Yeah.
there's emotional pain, right? The fear itself, I view that as pain, and I observe in myself that I respond to it the same way, where sometimes I avoid situations so I don't feel the emotional pain of my own fear.
Yeah.
But I get these moments of like, I'm here, I'm awake, I rise up above the battleground and I just go, wow, I did it,
Yeah.
I'm here. In that one moment made it all worthwhile.
All worth it. Yeah, absolutely. Because people will say that, like, oh, you got bumped, or sprained your ankle, or like you have frostbite. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't see it. Like, you
Yeah.
didn't see what we saw. And like you just, it's like, yeah, I can't explain it to you. Like, there's no words. Like, I'm not focused on the frostbite. I'm focused on what in how glad I am, that I did it, and how like incredible of a view that was. So yeah, I think you're
Mm,
absolutely right. I think it's the perfect moments, that for a lot of us who do these things, that's what makes it worth it.
mm, yeah,
That the reward outweighs the risk, and
yeah,
and as long as it does, I will always keep pushing the limits for sure.
yeah, yeah, little by little, right?
Yeah.
As you're describing, I'm picturing myself underwater looking up at my own bubbles that
Mhm.
go up to the ice, and
Mhm.
just and sort of, work
Yeah,
their way across it and expand and do different
yeah.
shapes.
They just kind of, yeah, they kind of dance, and I know we took a minute to, even though it's not advised in a dry suit, but it was fine. There was three of us, and we turned upside down to put our feet on the ice and just kind of like walk along it a little bit, and kind of see how that feels. And it is funny because just after just a couple seconds, maybe your kind of perspective shifts. And so it doesn't feel like you're upside down. It feels kind of like right. you know,
Yeah.
but just doing all these great things and being able to look around and see these, there are creatures that live under the ice, and you're just like, man, you're just hanging out here, huh? This is where you live. um, like it's cold. And it is, you do find things, because if people drop stuff in a lake and it freezes over, they're not going to get it.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just this whole very different world. And
Oh.
being able to look up and even just see what's going on the surface, kind of, but through the distortion of ice,
Mhm.
because there's people ice fishing maybe, or walking. It's very cool. And yeah, to me, I probably could watch the bubbles under the surface of the ice all day and not get tired. Just to me, it's just a very pretty, beautiful thing. And immediately, two of our instructors, one went to Iceland, of course, to dive, and one just got done diving in Antarctica, and they swam
Wow.
with some of the emperor penguins. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing it.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
But yeah, it was all of that, discussion. We discussed, the fear of being cold,
Mhm.
but also, having hundreds of penguins by you and being like, oh man, I don't
Yep.
know what to think. But then just kind of letting it happen, and it being this beautiful thing of who else does this.
Yes.
So yeah, and I think, yeah, it's just like you said it perfectly. It's just those little perfect moments of getting through the fear and saying like, yeah, this is awesome, and may not be awesome for other people, and that's fine, but for
Yep.
me, like, this
Yep.
is what it's about.
Right. Yeah. To shift perspective
Yeah,
in a way that really wakes us up again in a new
yeah.
way.
And
To
doing that in, I mean, I apply that to everything, even if it's just like a bad work day, being able to shift perspective and say, okay, like, this is, I'm fortunate to have work or to do my job, and it's okay. And it applies to every single day in your life.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That perfect moment is not in time the way I look at it. It's a perfect
Yeah.
moment that now exists in your consciousness because you experienced it, which means it's accessible in any moment,
Yeah,
especially the ones when it's sort of darkest and the light can come in through that crack of least
absolutely.
resistance. That experience is not, to me, it's not a memory, it's a place in my mind.
Yes, absolutely. And I think of that when we were talking, at the beginning about, how I got back into this in scuba diving. But all of this, um, all of these experiences and this beauty and being able to help other people, um, and, doing the, I guess, less glorious part of diving, doing search and recovery. None of this would have happened, or would have happened way, way later, had it not been for this one event, that in itself was tragic and has opened up a lot of doors, not only for me, but for other people, and being able to say, yes, I have this skill that's wonderful and allows me to travel and do these great things, but I'll also use it for less, fun things,
Right.
that can help other people. And so there was, definitely some beauty that came out of it, and it can be both. It can be tragic and it can be beautiful all at the same time,
Yeah.
and you don't have to pick one.
Yeah, well,
So
that's an enlightened perspective that we all have uh, moments where we forget all about the non-dualistic perspective, right? We all get
yeah.
into this like cut it in half. The Chinese called it shi and fei, to cut
Mm,
things into shi and fei, good and bad, up and down, worthy and not worthy, or
yeah.
and I think that's where the suffering comes into our lives when we get into this all or nothing stinking thinking.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the experiences that are most challenging are a lot less challenging when we see the value, when we appreciate the value
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
what's
absolutely.
happening.
And I think I've told myself constantly, like, would I give every experience and certification that I've gotten in this past year? Would I give it back to have my nephew back? Absolutely, in a heartbeat, absolutely. However, like this is what life gave us. And we're all gonna process it in different ways, but this is what I'm going to make out of it. Like this is what I'm going to do, and this is where I'm going to spend my time with him, is in the water, as because he loved the water. And so I'm like, yeah, this is where we spend our time together, and this is where I help other people. And if I can do something I love that not only I love, but that helps other people, it's just a win,
Yep.
in
Yep.
every way, really. So
Yep. Yeah.
yeah,
You're healing yourself as you help the world. Hey, how
a-
cool is that?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't doubt that a lot of people are going to hear this stuff and hear parallels in their own lives.
Yeah,
And
I hope
and I
so.
believe this kind of discussion needs to happen more.
It does.
To make meaning, to find the meaning. It's not even making it, to observe how our lives, especially the most painful stuff, are an opportunity to pivot and
Yeah.
receive it in a way that makes life more. I guess
Yeah.
I'll stop right there with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. It's in so many ways, like I'm doing it for me. I'm doing things that, he's not going to get to do. And we are also helping people kind of because of him and, in his name. And so you can't lose with that. And it can still um hurt, it can still hurt, and you can be like you said, kind of angry, which is in its own way to me just kind of fear in disguise.
Hmm.
And you could be scared, and you can be all these things while still moving forward.
I
And
agree.
that is to me, that's the lesson. That's what it's
Yep.
about.
It sure is. It sure is. And it does require a strength of will to
Yeah.
look
Oh
for the lesson, to look for the meaning.
yeah.
And you could say, well, everything happens for a purpose. And about half the crowd is going to be like, I mean, come on, really? And you can think of a million things that don't appear to have meaning. It's just a horrible tragedy. It's a
Yeah.
disaster.
And you're
Um,
allowed, to have those days where you don't see the purpose, and you're like, no, this was terrible and it was awful and there was no reason for it. And then have days where you're like, okay, well, this came out of it, so it's okay. But it's not every day is going to be, the sunshine and rainbows. Like, you still get incredibly angry on some days. And just, but again, being kind enough to yourself to allow that
to
and
feel your
say that's
feelings.
perfect, that's perfectly okay.
Yep.
But yeah, the finding a purpose, or just a reason to sometimes to just get up, to just get up in the morning. It doesn't have to be this grand thing that you do, but just those little moments throughout the day and throughout your life that end up becoming really great moments is to
Yep.
me what it's about. Like at my lowest point, looking looking in the past for those perfect moments I had,
Hmm.
and knowing that I will have them again, and looking forward to those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. A lot of folks are dealing with situations where they experience something terrible, and it's irrefutable, and it's valid from any perspective that this was horrible, and they get stuck in it.
Yeah.
And what I love about your story is that you chose through force of will to utilize it, to sort of move past it. And I guarantee, I'm sure of it, that you didn't always have that perspective.
No,
But you
not at
achieved it.
all.
But you achieved it.
Mm.
You made a choice to pivot on that experience, and
Yeah,
compost it. I think everything, it's not shit, it's compost.
it's
It's
true.
going to grow another
It's true.
flower. Yeah, but
Yeah, and
right now
it's
it just smells like shit.
you're not wrong. Yeah, and there's, his it's just such a it's actually so great that we connected this week because Friday is his birthday. And so we're having this like celebration of his birthday. And so, we've been talking about that there's just this there's all of these emotions, right? Like there's fear and there's sadness and there's anger and there's all of these things. But like in the midst of that, it's just like our little, core family who is just kind of there and loving each other and talking about we have like a memorial scholarship in his name, and there's just all of these great things that have come out this year that will help other people. But yeah, it's like you said, it's about that pivot of saying, okay, we can be angry and we can be sad, and that's valid. But look, in the midst of all that, what has happened to help other people?
Yep.
And so yeah, I think that's really important. And if people can do that, whether it's right after it happens, whether it's a year or years after it happens, but like I said, just not being stuck there forever. And that's admittedly incredibly hard. So I never tell people, oh, it's just easy, have you ever just tried to be happy? But knowing that it is possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, in the same way that those perfect moments in the sky or wherever, we have this absolute timeless moment, that it exists in a positive way where it's always a touchstone within your consciousness. We
Mhm.
also have the other type,
Yeah.
all these moments that it's like literally like it's routed directly to our heart of pain, our deepest, darkest places within us where there's absolute helplessness, hopelessness. The world is wrong,
Yeah.
everything is a mess, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. That set of thoughts has tendrils that go out to so many different things in our lives, and I think
Mhm.
it's very important to be able to go to those places
Yeah,
fearlessly, courageously, like you
absolutely.
did under the water. Those moments where I'm sure you must have had a moment where you're kind of starting to panic and really go into that dark place, and then just
Yeah.
softened
Oh,
within
more
it.
than a few moments. Yeah.
Yeah, I
More
don't
than
know
a few.
at all, right? But then you softened it again. You
Yeah.
soft you softened it again,
Yeah,
and recognizing that we have that power too, to
absolutely.
sort of be here, reaching towards this other one, and
Yeah.
bring
And I think
bring light, bring light.
really saying to yourself, if my mind has the ability to panic in an instant, it has the ability to calm itself in an instant.
There it is.
So yeah.
There it is. That's enlightenment right there. The recognition that this is my mind, this is my
Yeah.
dream, this is my dream,
Yeah.
and
Like
I
I'm
can.
in control here, darn it.
Mhm. Yeah, who else
So
is affecting you, really? I mean, I'm not a victim of the world that I see.
yeah.
And
So
in a lot
yeah,
of ways, I'm projecting it. I'm creating it through my perspective.
it's true. It's true. So yeah, it's just it's getting through the little moments, and that's all you can do, but um yeah, but what despite being very cold, what an incredible experience to have, because I was able to get through each of those small panicky moments. So
Absolutely. Through
um
through the allowance of grace.
yeah,
That's the word that's coming for me, where you just sort of soothe and relax and you feel like you're being hugged by the universe just in that moment, held in the arms of the great mother kind of thing. And
yeah,
she's just rocking and humming to us. We have that ability to tune into that frequency at all times
absolutely.
to soothe the
Yeah.
pain.
And yeah, just honing that ability and finding out what works for you to get there, to get to that moment.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, what incredible experiences we've had, and like what incredible people we get to meet because of it. you
Hmm.
know. So,
Right. Exactly. Cool finds cool.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and the people in general. I mean, I'm sure you found this too with skydiving, scuba, or anything else. That the people that are drawn to this are very like-minded. They're
Yeah,
all they understand everything that we're talking about right here. They'd be like,
they
yeah, yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah, right.
They
And
absolutely
not everybody is, and that's fine too. But if you
do.
go to a passion-driven life where you let what you love be your reason for doing things, you let your passion be
Hmm.
what drives you and not what you think you should do.
Yeah,
You know, in kind of a traditional grown-up sense, and what our culture tells us, what we should
it's
do.
true.
Um,
Yeah, it's, when you think of it, the different people, whether it's, we have like former astronauts and neurosurgeons and, just so lawyer, just so many people that we jump with. And,
mhm,
in that moment, we're all just skydivers, we're not just
mhm,
these, and we're not like a bunch of, shoeless hippies that people think we are. They're just,
mhm.
we come from all walks of life, but yeah, when we are doing it together, it doesn't matter. And that's what's so great about it to me. That's what's so beautiful about it. If I'm under ice, I don't care what the guy next to me does during the day.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I care that he has my back under the ice.
Mhm.
So, and and where else would I ever run into these people, So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's what's pretty great about it.
Yeah, yeah. I try to discern what I pursue in life based on TCC. Is it true? Is it compassionate? And is connecting?
Yeah,
Those three. Right? Is it connecting me to other people?
yeah.
And that's skydiving as a whole.
Oh, yeah. You
It's
you are physically, emotionally, mentally connecting to other people. So,
mhm,
yeah,
yeah.
and it's yeah, I mean, some of the best people in my life. I've met, I was telling a friend the other day, like with scuba diving and skydiving, at least in the midst of the activity, there's not a lot of talking. Because you
Yep.
can't.
Yeah.
But I said, so these two sports that you think have very little communication, I have met some of my favorites, people and lifelong friends in activities where we can't really talk to each other, but
But
you
you can
are
debrief.
connected.
You know,
Yeah.
there's the briefing and the debriefing, and then in the middle,
Yeah.
you get to tune into your other senses. You get to
Yeah.
communicate non-verbally, right? So that
Non-verbally.
causes us
Yeah.
to lean into our connections.
Yeah. And there's so much, there's just so much like one there's so much greatness in that complete nonverbal communication and syncing of especially to me like this is what I love about big formation skydiving, whether it's vertical or belly, like you have over 100 people in tune with each other in
Mhm.
nonverbal ways to get this done, and I'm like at incredible speeds, so I'm like how beautiful is that, like how wonderful is that,
It really is.
because on the ground I can't even verbally communicate effectively with people sometimes. So to
Yep.
do that is just incredible to me.
The
So, and it
cooperation.
just um shows how like when we're in tune with each other, like words aren't even really needed.
Yeah. And when we work together, we can do
Yes.
great things,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this world
Pretty
has
great
a
thing.
bunch of things. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed, like
So
big
many.
time, right? I mean, we look back in the old days, oh, they used those coal trains, and the smoke from the train is coming out and it's just, disgusting. Like, well, that was then. They were dirty, they had
Yeah.
horses. Look at us. We are way dirtier. So how are we gonna fix that? We're gonna fix it together. We're
Yeah.
going to fix it
Yeah.
together by putting our heads together and working as teams and thinking it through and solving the problem of, you know, chopping fewer trees down, making sure the bees are happy, no bees, no
Yeah.
me's, you
Oh,
know,
right.
right?
Yes.
We've got, social problems that we need to fix, all these judgments and, the line between this side of the fence politically and that side. Are you kidding? There's no fence. There's
No,
only people.
it's true. At the end of the day, like there's only people, and the more we can have conversations like this, and the more people can look at the ways that they're connected,
Mhm.
I think the closer we get to fixing some of those things.
We are every
Yeah.
day. Every day we're getting closer. But to remind the world, of how we can soothe our fear about where things are currently going. Your airplane's headed towards a mountain. Does it mean it's going to hit the mountain? No, it's just your current destiny based on the physics. The gasoline cars, that is clearly, the airplane that we're all on is headed towards Mount Everest, but we can turn,
Yeah.
we're going to. We're going
Yeah.
to. It's
We
just going
will.
to take a little time. Absolutely. I believe
Yeah.
it. I believe in the human race.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like the last one.
It's true. It's hard. It's hard sometimes to believe in the good of humanity, but we're inundated with the opposite. But getting out in the actual world and not the virtual world, it's very easy
Yes.
to believe in humanity.
Yes. When you meet people one on one and you look them in the eye and you go, "Oh, you're in that one." We're all one. We're all one
Yeah.
mind, different, puppets, same puppet master,
Yeah.
the way I
Absolutely.
look at it, and that puppet master is love. That's the
Yeah.
way I look at it.
I agree. Yeah. We'll get there.
We are getting there.
Yeah.
We're right on track. Yeah.
We are. I
All
agree.
right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this awesome conversation.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to it. I really appreciate it. It was definitely needed. And yeah, I hope people, tune in and yeah, see the parallels and get a little bit of hope.
Hmm. Maybe a lot.
Yeah, that is the goal for sure.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, thank you again, B. That was really, really cool.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
All righty. Bye.
What if this was the best jump of your life?
I can see laughter, or I can see tears. I see a choice, love or fear. What do you choose? I can see peace, or I can see war. I can see sunshine, or I can see a storm. What do you choose? No, I choose to love where freedom flies from my heart, where the light keeps shining. And I choose to feel the whole world crying for the strength that we can rise above. I choose love. I choose love. I can see sharing, or I can see greed. I can see caring, or poverty. So what do you choose? I can see gardens, or I can see bombs. I can see life or death coming on strong.